Hi folks, welcome to Saturday's Coffee with John. We are on 2nd John, and it's interesting, one of you got in touch with me and said that you really appreciate going through this quite slowly, and I think I've really appreciated it as well. 2nd John is one of those letters that you just skim read almost. You just go, it's so short, you just read it, chosen lady, truth, love, etc., etc. But when you stop and you think about things, you learn so much more, don't you? So, for example, I was actually going to do verses 10 and 11 together, but we're just going to do verse 10 because there's actually a lot in the and really practical importance for us. So let me just read it. It talks about, yesterday we saw that John was talking about continuing in the teaching. And if you don't continue in the teaching, if you run ahead, then you don't belong to the Father or the Son. And then this: if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take them into your house or welcome them. Now, we need to think about hospitality here as well and what's involved in this, because we are told to entertain strangers, and in doing so, some have entertained angels unawares. We're also told to love our enemies. So how does that fit in with this? Well, there was an established pattern in the early church. This is reflected in the Didache, the teaching of the Lord to the Gentiles through the 12 apostles, as it's called, which says this: let everyone that comes in the name of the Lord be received, and then when you've proved him, you shall know, for you shall have understanding to distinguish between the right hand and the left. If he that comes as a passerby, succour him as far as you can, but he shall not abide with you longer than 2 or 3 days, unless there be necessity. So there was a practice in the early church of visiting teachers, wandering teachers. You accepted them, and you offered them hospitality in your home, and so on. I remember, different cultures have different ways, but I remember going to speak at a church in the US, in Memphis actually, and they phoned up and they said, I was going up from Jackson, Mississippi, and they said to me, we book you into a hotel. And I said, no, don't do that. I'll just go and stay with the pastor. Because in Scotland, to put you up in a hotel was like, that's only for the rich people, or that's for the really famous people, or whatever. You just normally stay with someone in the congregation when you go and speak. And they were quite horrified at me, because the only people who got to stay with their senior pastor would be like Billy Graham or somebody really famous. Hotels were for plebs, and I was a pleb. So it's a very interesting way of doing it. However, I don't think this passage is talking primarily about hospitality. I think it's talking about accepting teachers who do not go along with the teaching of Christ. Showing them hospitality would be one part of that recognition and acceptance. So I think an example I would give would be here behind me is our church hall. And we've obviously got our church building, and there are people who sometimes want to use that. And in particular, I remember one group came and, blessed brother, and we are a Christian group, etc., etc. But when I looked them up, I saw that not only were they prosperity gospel, but they were very cult-like. And I just thought, no matter how much money they offer us, we're not going to rent it out to you. We're not going to rent out the hall. We're not going to rent out the church because of this teaching here. Do not take them into your house or welcome them. And I think, again, we'll maybe talk on Tuesday about some of the further practical implications of that. But look, false teaching is not something that you can just wink your eye at. It is absolutely deadly. It is poisonous. It's like having a restaurant and someone comes in with poison and wants to use it as an ingredient in your meals. You'd say, absolutely not. Well, that's exactly the same, which is why I do not understand. I'll give you an example, and then, as I say, we'll talk more about this on Tuesday. But I remember being asked to take part in a gospel meeting, and we couldn't do it because we couldn't agree on what the gospel was. But there's another time I remember being asked to do a joint service with a couple of churches of Scotland actually, for Easter, and I was happy to do that. I really was. But then the Evangelical Church of Scotland, where it was due to be held, and we would have gone along, said, well, look, I felt obliged to ask our neighbouring Church of Scotland, who are liberal, and we'll need to ask the minister there to pray. And I said, absolutely not. There's no way I'll partake in that. for two reasons. The man himself denies the gospel. He thinks the atonement is an atrocious doctrine. And here we are at Easter, the very center of the Christian faith, the atonement. And you're asking us to take part in a service with a man who denies what Easter is all about. There's no way I'll do that. But what I couldn't understand was how this man, who was a good Bible teacher, could take him along. What was he saying? Was he saying that, well, we've got one view, they've got another view. It doesn't really matter that much. I think it really, really matters. I wouldn't let a racist take part in my service. I wouldn't let somebody who discriminates against the poor take part in a service. I wouldn't let somebody who was a consistent wife beater or misogynist take part in a service. Why would I let somebody who denies fundamentals of the gospel take part in a service? It doesn't make any sense. So that's, I think, the point of this here. Do not take them into your house or welcome them. No, you're not welcome. And I've actually said that to people. I've said to groups who want to use our church, I don't care, denominations, different denominations is fine, secular groups fine, but no way will we let people who are heretics in. So, anyway, more about this on Tuesday, but God bless you. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope you go to a church where you're not going to hear heresy tomorrow. Bye.